Scythe, Ticket to Ride New York, and Baba is You. This is Staying In.
It's a life changer since I started using two screens. I first used them at work, right? And I don't know if you've ever... I mean, how many screens do you use, Kris?
Just the one.
Just the one at work, yeah?
Yeah, just the one at work.
Okay, Mark?
I use 3, like an absolute Tory.
Right, okay, right. Here's the thing. I used to use one screen at work, and I was always like, this is absolutely fine for me. I'm fine. I got my tab game down. I know exactly what I'm doing. Tab, 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 all throughout all the sort of stuff, all the stuff. I can't remember what it was. I think it was basically like a spreadsheet and a graph or something like that. And I immediately knew. I was like, I'm going to need to get a second screen here. And I went up to a second screen at work, and then I came home, and I only had the one on my computer. And I just thought, what am I doing with my life? The more screens you add, to a point, then the better, I would argue.
To a point. I mean, you can have too many screens, and I will say that everyone in my office has 2 screens.
Right.
But I have a monitor at home that, because, I moved to Ireland, and I haven't really had, like, my own kind of proper office-type area to have my laptop and my monitor. So I thought, you know what, I'll just take my monitor and I'll use it in work, and I'll have 3 monitors. And because of the work that I do, I have one screen that has Discord and Skype open. I've got one screen which has Zendesk for all the work I'm doing on there. And then I have just the monitor, what I call just the tab screen of death. It's, 45 Google Sheets of varying content and quality, and then maybe a Twitter feed going as well. Mm-hmm. As I have managed to find ways to reduce the work or streamline the work that I do, I have come to the realization that I do just have this screen that sits there, and it really is just a Twitter feed now. That's all it is. That's all it is.
That's the thing. That's why I want a third screen at home. It's not going to be for Twitter. It's going to be for, I'm going to see whether or not I can download Winamp and get like a visualization going, right? And have like some sort of mad DJ sort of visualization thing playing along to, I don't know, whatever it is I'm listening to at the time.
So you basically want like the early PlayStation 1 demo kind of like thing going on.
In all honesty, that's actually what I want. I want to hook up that PlayStation, and I want to get a CRT TV, and I want to put Music Player on, or whatever the hell it was called.
What was it? No, what was it called? There was, wasn't it? Game's the wrong word for it, but you could buy it, and it was.
There was a demo disc.
Yeah.
And then there was a demo disc that had, I think, some visualizers. On the actual, like, PlayStation, the original PlayStation 1
you just
grey
popped
thing.
a CD in.
You popped a CD in, you get a little visualization. But there was also Music 2000.
That's it. Music 2000.
That had, like, a proper, like, if you put your CD in, like, if you're not too busy doing the same sort of thing with VibRibbon.
VibRibbon, yes.
I was going to say VibRibbon.
Right? Then you can put that in, and we'll give you this really ace-looking 90s visualizer. And I just want to dedicate a screen to that, really. Kris, I don't really understand how you're doing anything with a single screen unless it is 12 feet long or something like that.
Well, I just kind of worry that, like, 3 screens would just go beyond my peripheral vision.
It is kind of like, if you see a drummer, like, if you've ever seen Iron Maiden, their drummer, he is surrounded by a drum kit. You can't actually see him. He's hidden behind crash cymbals and whatever else.
It's everything. Anytime he moves, he creates percussion.
Yeah, pretty much. You just fling an arm out and there's a cymbal behind me. Cool, awesome. It's kind of a similar thing with the monitors. You kind of look up and every now and again my head pops up from just a sea of monitors. But you feel like a king, though. You feel like a champ.
Right, exactly. And that really is what it's all about, I think. It's about feeling like, hey, maybe I am Sandra Bullock from those hacker movies that she did once, right? Maybe I am that person.
How many hacker movies did Sandra Bullock do, Pete?
Yeah, this is a reference that's lost on me.
Pete, by the way, Mark, has very, dare I say it, limited knowledge of cinema. So his references are always left of field.
Okay.
She was in The Net, the 1995 film The Net.
I reckon, Pete, you saw that on ITV. And every time it went to commercial break, that for you segmented it, and it created a new film when it cut back after the break.
I think
new film.
That actually might be right, basically. It looks great. I don't remember any of it.
Except Sandra Bullock's a hacker?
Sandra Bullock... Right, okay. Sandra Bullock is a hacker, right?
All right.
I think I was basically so struck by that as an idea. It's like, I don't know...
Sandra Bullock driving a bus that, if it goes under 50, will explode? You know,
no, but I can understand that. I can understand that as a premise, right? I guess it's just that Sandra Bullock doesn't convince me when she's typing away.
You know what it is? It's kind of like when Denise Richards was, what the hell was she in The World Is Not Enough? Like a nuclear physicist or something.
I just don't, it's like I just don't agree that you are this person. It would be like if you cast, like let's say, for example, you were doing a movie about Don Juan, right? And the director decided to cast Joe Pasquale in the leading role. I wouldn't believe that was it. Sandra Bullock, great actress, I'm sure. I'm sure I've seen her in many other things. And I'm sure she's fantastic. Well, like I liked her in that. I totally got that she was she was in. It was Speed 2 or Speed 1 that she was in.
She's in both of them.
She's in both.
She drives a boat in the second one. It's Keanu that's not in the second one.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I completely believe that she would be in that sort of terrible situation twice in her life. Wasn't she also in that one where, she was also in Gravity. I completely believed that she was an amazing, like, astronaut and and like all that sort of stuff. She was really, really good in that. Thought she was ace. Really good in Gravity. Saw that in the cinema, actually. I just did not believe for a second that she was hacking into mainframes, uploading data to mini disc or whatever the devil it was that hackers were doing in 1993 or 95 or whatever it is. I just didn't agree.
And that took you out of it?
It just took me out of it. That's what I'm saying.
I recently went to see the 20th anniversary screening of The Matrix. And
20th anniversary?
The 20th anniversary, yeah. So it was released in 1999, because we are that old now, to give you some kind of idea of how long and how far life has gone since then. I wanted to go and see it because I haven't seen that film in about 10, 15 years. And when it first came out, I will admit that my grandparents at the time had a pirated cable box. And there were about, I know, it's the first time that we're revealing this. They had about 4 or 5 channels which were related, just that you could go and you could rent a film for a couple of quid. And, you could just do that. And this was pretty kind of revolutionary for the time, I guess. But because we had this box, it meant that all those films were available. So I watched The Matrix 50 times and I watched Notting Hill 100 times. And
classic double bill.
Oh, exactly. But as a 12-year-old, obviously there are certain themes and concepts and ideas with The Matrix that may kind of pass over your head. So I wanted to see it again to see, okay, what would I miss the first time? And obviously, it's The Matrix, it's on the cinema screen, I never got a chance, you had to go and see it. And I came away from it just, one, blown away how good that film still looks, 20 years later. There's very few, there's maybe like 2 scenes that are a little bit, well, that's definitely, there's a green screen, or something's kind of going on in the background there. But for the most part, that film holds up remarkably well, I think because there's actually a lot more kind of physical stuff than there is CGI. That where the CGI is used really, really well. The other thing as well is the film isn't as dated as I thought it might be, because there are a lot of films from the 80s and the 90s, and specifically the 90s. Like I remember watching The Beach last year, and that film is so quintessentially 90s, and I think a lot of it's to do with the soundtrack and the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio looks about 12. So
right, sure.
But it was those 2 things, and just the general idea that it's amazing that film got released and was created, as it was, that the Wachowski brothers were given just, that, hey, here's our script. Well, they wrote 3 scripts. There was 2 films and there was The Matrix. And Warner Brothers just bought all 3 scripts, and they created, it was Assassin and then Bound. And Bound was the first one that they directed. And they were given a budget of $3 million, and it became like a cult classic. And then Warner Brothers were like, hey, here's $65 million, go and make The Matrix as your second film. Which is, now, obviously, there are certain, because The Matrix is very much heavily influenced by cyberpunk and anime, and a lot of stuff that in 2019 has crossed over to the Western audience. But in 1999, you've had some stuff like, Akira is obviously a cult classic that made its way over. But a film like that, in 1999, it's very much a risk for a studio like Warner Bros. To release. And just, reading up about how they were just, hey, here's 65 million. They didn't change the script. They didn't, when they got the final cut to look at, they were like, yeah, this is incredible. This is the film that we're going to release. Yeah. And not that, in 2019, it's not like The Matrix is a massively weighty, complex film, but it does have its big core idea of The Matrix being this virtual world that we live in, and kind of idea of the blissful ignorance that we're not aware of the real world, and the red pill and the blue pill, which all writers love to have this whole like, hey, we're the red pillars and all that nonsense. And it's just amazing that film got released as it did, and holds up as well as it did. I don't know if you have opinions about The Matrix or anything, but
I think I've got to say, I think that like the thing with The Matrix that sticks out in my mind from that period of time is obviously like DVD was just kicking off like properly, right? I remember it being like one of the first DVDs that I saw in a shop. I remember going into a Sam Goody, right? A Sam Goody store, which was like basically like an HMV at the time. I think HMV still exists. Basically went in and saw this DVD for the first time because I had a video CD which I'd imported from Japan for like some weird animation thing that I really wanted to watch, like some anime. And VCD was like, oh wow, this is incredible, this is the future. And then I remember seeing like the first DVDs, and I was also super hyped around this sort of time because I knew I was getting a PlayStation 2 for joint birthday and Christmas present. And obviously DVDs and the PS2 are kind of synonymous with one another. It's definitely like PS2 was kind of one of the pieces of hardware that really pushed. I mean, it was the cheapest DVD player that you could get at one point at PS2, which I think really helped push the medium forward. And I remember seeing The Matrix in a box, and it was a cardboard box.
I own that DVD. Yeah, it was the first DVD I ever bought, and it's right. It's a foldable and it was a cardboard box. And back in the day, when you'd get the chapters list actually printed inside. Right,
exactly. And I remember also seeing like when I got the I eventually saw it on DVD, played it on a DVD player. I remember seeing like genuinely interesting like interactive DVD menu stuff where they were like, oh no, this is gonna be the future of watching movies. VHS rubbish, because you can't, different. Like, the idea was that you could see different angles of the movie on the DVD. You could basically go, oh, I don't want to watch this angle of the movie. No, listen, Wachowskis, I'm not interested in what you think good direction is. I want to go over here instead, which I thought was really interesting at the time. And yeah, I guess I remember loving that film and thinking, man, like, I can't wait for another one of these. And then like,
and then it happened.
And it was like, oh, maybe the next one will be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's really interesting that it's come out 20 years later. Obviously, it's just a milestone, right? Like, there's any excuse to put out a thing again. But do you think it's like relevant now? Like, you see all this, so you see Cyberpunk, like that's doing for the Witcher folks over at CD Projekt. Like, Cyberpunk seems to be getting a lot of like interest from a lot of different people. You see, I mean, even the RPG's done quite well. You see stuff like, I mean, the Netrunner card game's gone away, but you can see people who have already said, oh, we're going to do more with Android. And I think the actual Netrunner license might be going to somebody else at the moment. Something like, I think I heard something about that the other day. There seems to be kind of like a cyberpunk-y stuff. There was Blade Runner 2. The second Blade Runner movie came out relatively recently. Is this like the zeitgeist at the moment?
I think it's more actually just because of Keanu Reeves and his resurgence in the last sort of 5 to 7 years with the John Wick films, because he's had a very interesting career with some highs and lows, from like the early stuff with Bill and Ted's to Speed to his first cyberpunk film was that Johnny Mnemonic, which is a word I can never say properly.
The Philip K. Dick novel, right?
Yeah. And then there was The Matrix, and then he had just a slump where You had the two Matrix sequels. You had, I remember seeing a samurai film he was in, like 49 Ronin or 47 Ronin or something, and a couple other films which were just
like A Scanner Darkly he did, the Richard Linklater film, which is based on another sci-fi novel.
And then he kind of just went down the ladder in terms of notable actors that you would think of. And then the first John Wick came out, and then everyone was like, Keanu Reeves, he's just the best. And, and then John Wick 2 happened, and then John Wick 3 happened, and he had a knife fight, a fight in a knife museum, which I thought was the most hilarious thing I'd ever seen in the first 5 minutes of cinema ever. And now he's obviously in the new Cyberpunk game, and, Keanu Reeves...
So it's less about Cyberpunk being zeitgeisty, it's more about Keanu Reeves is the greatest actor that the world has ever produced.
I'm not going to say the greatest, but I mean, do you know who was originally kind of pitched to play Neo?
It was Will Smith, wasn't it?
There was Will Smith, and there was one other person as well.
Ewan McGregor?
Nicolas Cage.
Oh my God.
Now, I'm not saying that The Matrix would have been better with Nicolas Cage. I'm saying it would have been an experience.
It would have been different.
I would have enjoyed it.
You know what I love about Nicolas Cage?
He would have questioned everything.
He would have questioned, right, that. And also, he gives it his all.
He does.
Every single role. There's not a single time.
Whether he should or he shouldn't as well.
Whether or not the character calls for it, it doesn't matter. He's going to put everything into that role. And you know what? Bless him. I can't imagine a person giving a completely different... Imagine Neo, this very quiet, thoughtful, reflective, can't really believe what he's being seen, and then he sort of has his sort of almost religious awakening and then becomes a very serene, meditative person. I can't imagine, how that would have been portrayed by him. And
keep in mind as well that Morpheus was also casted originally potentially for either Gary Oldman or Samuel Jackson. And the idea of Samuel Jackson and Nicolas Cage chewing up scenery like you've never seen before.
Do you know, maybe we're in the dark timeline. Because actually, I think that could be an amazing movie.
Could be.
Kris doesn't seem...
No, I don't think that would... It was interesting because lots of criticism was levied at Keanu Reeves' acting style as being quite wooden.
Yeah.
And actually, that kind of style, I'm not saying that he is wooden, but for The Matrix worked really, really well because you have this kind of doe-eyed, blissfully ignorant kind of individual who smells that there's something not quite right but can't quite put his finger on it, who has this curiosity. Yeah. But he's just this sponge, and he becomes the eyes for us, the audience, who is trying to slowly kind of stumble his way through this real world, let's say, in the same way that we are. And I think one of the reasons why the sequels didn't do as well was we lost that. Here we had a person who knew more than we did. We didn't have anyone who was us, really, in these latter two films, which actually I still do enjoy, broadly speaking, the ideas of it. It's just, I still can't get over that sense of disappointment with what followed.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like, you see something like The Matrix, and it was really foundational for me. I mean, me and my friends, so I think I saw it in the cinema. I think seeing The Matrix in the cinema at the time, I think was our generation's, I was at the Sex Pistols' first concert. Apparently it didn't actually do that well at the box office, especially in the UK. It just didn't do numbers at all. And then I think a lot of people were like, I totally saw that in the cinema. And I think I saw that first one in the cinema, but I can't remember. But remember when I saw it at roughly the same time as all of my pals at the time. And then from then on, it was and we were sort of like the ones who were into alternative music, the few people in my area that were actually into alternative music. From then on, it was all about trench coats.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a trench coat from, what they call Blue Banana or whatever it is, if you didn't have something like that.
Well, it also helped that, this was in the late 90s and you had the kind of new metal scene in America had really picked up and, Angry White Boy loud music was the new thing, and
yeah.
Unfortunately, we kind of saw with stuff like Columbine, where they were actually very much into trench coats, and that kind of helped. That's a whole other conversation we don't need to get into, considering recent events. But yeah, the trench coats, I do remember seeing them, and I was only like 12, 13 at the time. But for me, I kind of was like, why is everyone like wearing these Neo-Rocks that are like 7 feet tall, and everyone's dressed in black, and it's September, like, or it's August. What's going on here?
It's just like, come on, take that off. You're going to be sweating. Yeah. I think, honestly, so, yeah, I mean, like, The Matrix to me is like one of those, like, those touch points, right? Like 1999 of like, man, the future's going to be amazing. Like, it's going to be super, yeah, like 1999, right? You're right at the turn of the millennium. The 20th century's just about to finish. I can't wait for the 21st century. That sounds so futuristic. Imagine living in 2010. That would be incredible. It's going to be, we're going to do so many amazing things with technology. These Wachowskis, they've got this really, really cool idea about like data and humans and how we're all going to interface with maybe the internet. I mean, I've got some hours on AOL. I reckon it's going to be pretty good. And all that stuff. And I remember being super excited about that. And it's all kind of like, it's all merged together into this one sort of crystallization of around the same time thing.
Yeah. I do think that the thing there about the internet, I think that kind of helped with just the hype around the film, is that was in the early days of the internet, and they had the What is the Matrix website, and I think all that stuff really, very much the timing of that film when it was released, as the millennium was coming around, and I don't know when the millennium bug became the thing that people were terrified about, but technology was certainly advancing to a point where, I don't know, I guess, because I think the thing with the Matrix, and we've mentioned there about like cyberpunk and technologies, but there was definitely like this idea of the mainstream consciousness becoming a little bit more aware, I guess, of technology and the advancements in technology. And not to say that the Matrix was the thing that made everyone go, the future and the internet, and we should be really scared. But I think it played a point, and it is definitely it left a cultural mark, I think, in the grand scheme of things. And Hugo Weaving is amazing. Yeah, I didn't want to finish this without pointing out that Hugo Weaving is incredible as Agent Smith, and just his portrayal of like being kind of like an android, but not quite, and his speech he gives to Morpheus about the human race being like a disease, and oh my god, he's amazing in that.
What was he in? What was Hugo in recently?
He was the Red Skull in the first Captain America film.
He's been Elrond in Lord of the Rings.
Who was he in Lord of the Rings?
Elrond,
Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Which one's Ron?
He's like one of the head elves.
Ronnie. Which one's Ronnie?
Yeah, a head
Elrond,
elf.
One of the head elves in Rivendell.
Is he the one who sends them all out on the quest, and he's married to that lady one?
He sends them out on the quest, yeah.
All right, okay.
They have the big council where they all sit around and chat, shoot the breeze.
Yeah. Talking about slamming things together that don't theoretically work, Kris, you've been playing Scythe.
I really have, and that is actually, Pete, a really good description of this game. And you told me that when I said I was going to play it.
It's weird, isn't it?
I didn't quite believe you. Mark, have you come across this game at all?
What was the game? I missed that.
Scythe.
Oh, Scythe. No,
it's basically a board game, and you can get it as a PC version on Steam. And I did download it because Pete warned me in advance that it's quite a crunchy game, and I thought, right, okay. Yeah. My neighbour has arranged for me, him, my partner, and his friends to kind of all gather at this board game cafe, this local one, and play the game. And I thought, okay, none of us have played the game before.
Yeah.
It was actually 7 of us in total playing it for the very first time.
Oh, no, Kris. How long did you rent the table out for?
It averages about 30 minutes per person.
Oh.
And so I thought, okay, I know this is going to be tricky. Thankfully, 2 of them had gone online and watched a kind of rules explanation. And actually, it does make a lot of sense playing it. The rules are pretty easy to pick up and play.
Definitely. 100%.
The problem with the game, and Sam will agree with this because we were chatting about this afterwards, because Sam has since played this with me and my neighbour, is that you look at it on the box, you think, that's a war game. Oh yeah, cool. Not like war game, like miniatures.
It looks like a strategy game
board game
to some degree. Yeah.
That's Memoir 44. Brilliant. Sam and I play that. We move things. It's area control. Great. It's about trying to hold these territories as much as you can. It's not that at all. It's an engine building game. Yeah. But if you look at the box, and the box is this beautiful artwork, it's set in the 1920s in a kind of alternative Europe where after the First World War, this big factory has gone defunct and it lies in the centre of this board. And all the different European factions are competing to try and get to this factory, and they're trying to build up their resources, and they're trying to get popularity, they're trying to get energy or power, they're trying to build structures on the board, they're trying to get workers in place, they're trying to upgrade all of their different aspects of their empire, for want of a better word, and they're fending off attacks if they happen. But on the box, it looks like you see these beautiful mech miniatures and you're thinking, okay, great, this is going to be combat, dice tracking, yada, yada, yada. It's not that at all.
No.
We played our first game of it. The first battle happened about 2 hours in. My partner made this battle because she thought, let's try it. She severely regretted it. And we learnt from that lesson, and none of us fought for the rest of the game.
It's a game about giant mechs, and it's not about giant mechs, and B, like you're really punished for going to war.
Yeah, because
massively.
The power you put in, because essentially it's like you secretly decide how much power you're putting in, and then you reveal your cards, and obviously it's that classic thing, whoever has the most power kind of wins, really.
Yeah.
But your power then that you put in is depleted, and it takes a while to get that up. And it is an engine building game. And, for the listeners who aren't familiar with an engine building game, it's where literally you have generally your own set of boards in front of you, and you are slowly but surely incrementally building up and leveling up different aspects of it. And that is where the enjoyment for me lies in this. I had my own little board.
Yeah.
And the board's got these little indentations in it that perfectly slot these cubes into it, which is really satisfying. Yeah. That is the lure of this game. It's not the beautiful board you've got in front of you and the moving stuff around. It's actually moving cubes down, upgrading. And I played it the second time, and I won. And the only reason I won was that nobody bothered me. They left me alone because it was me, my neighbour, and Sam. We all had our own portions of the map. My neighbour and Sam fought each other, and while they spent 2 turns preparing for the fight, I just had time to level up and get all my things on the board, all my mechs on the board. And you win if you've got stars on the leader table, and you get those stars for fulfilling all of your goals, your upgrades. There's a little bit of asymmetry there because everyone's players are slightly different. They all have slightly different goals as well. But it's an odd duck, this game. And it took me a second time playing for it to realise that actually it's one of those games that I enjoy playing it. Yeah. I would never want to own it. It's very much a game that I would occasionally play with mates at a board game cafe. Even though the expansions and particularly the Rise of Fenris do appeal to me quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm playing it tomorrow, actually. Our local board game cafe is running a Scythe night, and I've got a place on it, really. So it's going to be 7 of us, and he's hosting it. And Scythe's one of his favourite games. So I'm really curious to see, actually, what it's going to be like, because I don't think I'll have the opportunity to play the same strategy I did before, because there'll be 7 of us on this quite cramped set of territories, and we're going to be forced to compete with each other.
Yeah.
So the same strategy I did before won't work, and it will feel more like an area control game, I think.
You said, did you say that you'd bought the video game?
I did, yeah. I got it on Steam. I got it in the Steam sale, so it was relatively cheap at that point.
Oh, okay. So I'd be very. It's interesting that you wouldn't want to own it, but you own the video game version of it, right?
Yeah, that was really just as a primer, because actually I genuinely thought I would like it more than I did. I genuinely thought, this would be great. I won't fork out for the big board game, but if I have that itch that I want to scratch, I'll play it on Steam. Great.
I mean, have you played the video game since playing the board game?
No, I haven't.
Have you played the video game much?
No, I played the tutorial, and actually I find the tutorial a little bit impenetrable on the video game compared to actually playing it as a tabletop game.
That's really interesting, because I started mucking around with a couple of board game digital adaptations recently, and I also found the tutorials really. I find tutorials, and I don't know if you're the same as me, but I find tutorials in games very, very challenging when what they essentially give you is either, all right, click here, now click here, now click here, and we're going to give you a sort of vague rundown of what the rules are, but we're not really going to tell you why any of it's particularly interesting or useful, or it's just a wall of text.
I find that, like, if you have an instruction or a tutorial and it's just text, I will not know what is going on.
It's just like, skip.
Yeah, it has to be like an actual physical,
yeah,
do this, and
do the thing.
I just can't. I'm terrible with that kind of thing.
Especially with things like digital adaptations of board games. You're essentially the person who in the physical world, you'd be the person who's like, all right, okay, this is what you need to know. And you'd be the person like reading it through with them and say, okay, you do this, then you do this, then you do this. And Sam, for example, and you, Kris, indeed, are very, very good with board games and like bringing people on, because I'm sure you've done tons of it now, of like learning the rules and then telling people how to actually play the game. You're very good at it. But when you do that in a tutorial, and it's just, okay, read this and sort of vaguely, hopefully understand everything that's being said to you. Like, it's very different to be told, like, okay, you get three victory points, or whatever it is. And then you find the tutorial doesn't actually point to, and these are victory points. Or, like, more than that, they're like, these are 3 victory points. Okay, well, what do these actually do? Like, what are these victory points for? How many do I need? Is 3 good? What is the context of what you're telling me? And I find a lot of these digital adaptations are like woefully lacking in this. Like, they're just really poor at sort of like getting you on board unless you've already played the game beforehand.
That's what I think it is. I think that there's an expectation there that this is for people who've already played the game.
Yeah, like, have either of you played the digital version of Catan?
I've played both of them.
Right, because I haven't touched them yet, and I've been curious because they released one on the Switch not too long ago, and I'm curious to pick it up because Catan is one of my favourite board games to play. But I'm curious if I pick it up as I'm playing it. Like, I imagine it would do a similar thing with the tutorial. I would wonder, would I understand what is being explained to me, even though it's a game that I know, just because yeah, as you mentioned. Unless a tutorial is done in a specific way, if it's just a wall of text, it is very difficult to pick those things up. And I think that the big thing more than anything else is, if you have someone explaining the game to you, you can ask questions to them.
Right.
And you can't do that with a game.
And like, I think the thing with, so I played the most recent version of Catan, and I played the previous version as well. The previous version was not so good, and that's, I think, why they've changed it. The new version, I think the tutorial is better. If you've played Catan before, you'll get into it, because at some point you're just kind of like learning where all the buttons are.
Right.
The problem with Catan, for me personally, as an adaptation, is like, part of the fun of Catan is like, okay, I need 3 wood. Okay, I can give you 2 sheep, and it's having that haggle.
Yeah.
And when you're doing like a digital version of it, you're essentially like clicking through multiple menus to go 3, no, and it's like 3 wood, no, reject, and then it's like, okay, 2 wood, no, reject, and you there's no context of like why that's being rejected. It might just be that like they just don't want to give you the thing, and you just end up like click, 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 like trying to get through this thing all the time. Yeah, it's a funny old one. So I mean, like I was really interested in picking Scythe up, but like I haven't played the board game version in a while now, and I would definitely need a refresher. And it sounds like the tutorial is a bit like,
it is a bit meh. Like the best thing to do, Pete, honestly, would be I prefer, actually, I think, maybe I'll regret these words, but playing it on something like Tabletop Simulator, because seeing the cubes and being able to physically move the cubes as an upgrade, that tactility there, and maybe the people listening are saying, well, just play the game. It sounds like all you want is actually the live tabletop game.
Play the game, yeah.
But I think that actually, strangely enough, it flattens that experience on a screen, and because ironically, it's not a problem with you two because you have multiple screens. You're used to that kind of, but like this, having it all on a single screen, it misses the point of Scythe, where it's looking up at the board, seeing where your mechs are, seeing your workers, then looking down at your secret 2 boards, your 2 boards in front of you, thinking, yeah, I can do that. And there's also that feeling that, and I didn't get too precious in Scythe because whatever happened to my mechs on the board, my lovely little upgrade table right in front of me, no one was touching that. No one was going to damage that at all.
Right.
And I went into my own little world, kind of, I suppose, in an antisocial manner. But a lot of people are like this. I imagine lots of worker placement games, say, for example, where you've got your little board in front of you and you're just kind of, doing some housekeeping, that kind of thing, some light dusting. Shall I go here? Yeah. Because it is a very elegant game, actually. It is a really tightly constructed game. It feels really, really well tested. I just think that it's really interesting, depending on who you've got playing with you. The game almost takes on a completely different genre. If you've got people who know you very well and they deliberately just want to fight, it becomes a war game, becomes area control. If you've got people you don't know each other very well, which is what we had the first time I played it, 7 of us, who don't really want to, as our first introduction to these people we've never really met before,
annihilate them.
Yeah, declare war on them.
Yeah.
You just become very, pacifist, and you're just in your own little world there, and it becomes this nice little engine building game. Yeah, Scythe's a really strange beast. I almost want everyone to experience it because people won't believe me when I'm saying
it's
this.
Like 3 games.
Scythe. They'll go out and play it. But it's because there is a huge cult following for it.
And I think with good, just to be clear, I think with good reason. Like I think it's a cool game.
It feels really robust. It feels really chunky. It's crunchy. It's thinky. But it'll definitely be not what you expect it to be. I think that's my main takeaway from that. Really, it's definitely not what you expect it to be. If you want a good engine builder, though, we talked about it in the pod a few weeks ago. Brass. I think that's what it reminded me of a lot the most.
Okay. In
that regard, Brass. If you like that engine building side of things. Brass has picked up some awards this year as well, I think.
One of the reasons that I tend not to go with these big games like Scythe anymore, I have some big games, right? I'm not afraid of. There are some miniatures games over there. They are rules heavy, and I'm not afraid of that stuff. I'm also not afraid of big physically large games, right? I got Descent. I got 3 Catan boxes. Tons of stuff like that. I'm not afraid of those big things. But I definitely have, over the last, 2 years, become more and more put off by board games that take a long amount of time if they're not definitely going to be played by the group of people that I would more likely play with them. So like miniatures war games, skirmish games and war games and stuff like that. I'm kind of like, well, I know which ones my group plays, so I'm okay with these, and I'll put some time into actually making these things and making them all nice and learning all the rules, because I know that somebody's going to play, Boroughs and Badgers with me. It's going to be great. But I've kind of gone off buying games like Scythe for myself, simply because I know that I'm never going to play them. I don't buy it because, we're all split across different parts of, the UK. And I know that if I bought Seafall, which looks great, Seafall to me, I'd love to give Seafall, I love the idea of sales and all that sort of stuff. I've got Sails of Glory, for example. Sails of Glory, fantastic. Huge box. Really, really good game. Great game. But here's the problem. I don't really know anybody else who plays it, and then it takes 2 or 3 hours to play the game itself, and then you're kind of going down this thing. And actually, I found this was the case with a game that I really wanted to buy, and then completely put off purchasing because I was like, this takes too long, it's too much setup, and that game is Ticket to Ride, right? Because I really like Ticket to Ride. I think Ticket to Ride is a game that is it's accessible enough, the mechanics of them are accessible enough that you can actually teach it to new players quite quickly. The problem I always found is that games took an hour and a half, 2 hours, because it's you got the maths at the end, you've got explaining to people how the game actually works, you've got the bloody great big board, you got to explain how tunnels work if you're playing Europe, or if you different bits and pieces, right? For the various different versions, and it really put me off purchasing it for a really long time.
I find that really interesting. I'll let you carry on, but because I really, really enjoy Ticket to Ride, and I find that experience is actually quite similar to Catan in terms of the length of a game of Catan. If I'm just going with the base version of Catan, none of the extensions, none of the other stuff.
Yep.
I find that and Ticket to Ride are actually quite similar in comparable, and I also find in terms of teaching a new person I would say Ticket to Ride is probably even slightly easier.
I completely agree.
At the end.
Yeah, I completely agree. Catan, I bought Catan years ago. And so I had that before I started to feel a little bit like, I'm buying these games and not playing them. So like I have, I think technically 3 expansions for Catan and the original Catan. And 2 of the expansions I've not even used. Because I just found out through playing it, Catan, like you don't actually get that. I just don't have that kind of gaming group, right? I don't really have a gaming group as it is. And if we're going to play a game, then it's going to be with silly little toy soldiers. And I find Ticket to Ride's about an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, like depending on, if you're chilling out and relaxing and do whatever it is. And so it really put me off buying it for the longest time. Then I went to EGX Rezzed, and this was in, is it London? Yeah, it was London that was the one I went to. I think it was this year. And there was like a board game section, and I had no idea, but they had recently released a game called Ticket to Ride New York. And it was this tiny little box. It's really quite small. It's about the size of, it's a little bit smaller than the Arkham Horror card game box, which is about the same size as like all the other living card game boxes. It's a bit smaller than that, so it's actually quite compact. And I saw it and I was like, no, this is tiny. And I started talking to the nice person, nice couple who did these little pop-up board game stores. I wish I could remember their name now. And they were basically saying like, have you played Ticket to Ride? I was like, yes. Okay. And they were like, brilliant. This is a 20-minute version of that. And I was like, no, that cannot be done. Surely it must take an hour each game because that is how the game. It's like, no. Really small, set in New York, set in like, I think the swinging 60s. And the idea is that rather than trains, you're putting cabs together and you're putting different rides between different areas of New York from different tourist spots. And the idea is that you connect them. It's much like, again, it's like Ticket to Ride. If you played that, it is that. Yeah. But for anybody who hasn't played it, you can either pull cards from a set of coloured taxis, and basically those will then let you put down coloured taxis of the same colour onto the board to connect up different routes, basically. So if you get 3 pink cards and you convert them into 3 pink, you can then go on to 3 sections of pink route and connect those together, and then you score points against it. You can either do that, or you can pull out new destination cards, which allow you to basically try and get extra points to connect up these different destinations. But also the flip side of that is if you don't do them, you get minus points. And then the other one...
you start with destination cards to begin with, and the whole objective is to try and connect from, say, if we're using Europe, to connect from like London to Moscow. And that's your like destination card, and you have to go from there.
And you're going to get points and deducted, for example, if you can't do that.
Yeah.
Therefore, you have 3 actions in total. Pick up cards, put down taxis, or pick up a destination route. And it turns out that if you have a smaller map and a smaller number of playing pieces, it does take 20 minutes. And it has been the game that I have played the most recently, board game, that I've got out whenever I've had pals over. It has joined the honoured pantheon of Ticket to Ride New York with Catan and also with Splendor. The 3 games that basically are like, well, these are the games that like, if you have people coming over and they don't really play board games regularly, or even if they don't like board games, these are 3 where like, Catan's a bit iffy, but like, the other 2, they'll definitely like. Because it's like, Catan is a bit sort of like, oh, okay, like, if you don't like conflict, okay, that's going to be a little bit challenging. But the other 2, perfect. And like, man, I was legit, it made me realise that I've got to the point in my life now where I've started to realise why I like skirmish games in miniatures. It's why I like 20 to 40 minute board games. It's why I like 3-hour-long video games. It's because I get to have this lovely experience of Ticket to Ride, which I love. I just don't have to do that over this really extended period of time. And I think it's great. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
So you sound like you're describing like a meze board or tapas.
It's exactly that. It's board gaming tapas, right?
Is it like, a game like Scythe or one of those kind of big, complex games, you can own it and you can appreciate it, but it's like buying The Wall on vinyl. You would have it, but you're never going to listen to it because it's like, I don't have 90 minutes I can put for that, when I could just go and listen to Green Day for 20 minutes and I'm good. And
Right.
I'm fine.
Exactly. And it's that thing of like, I still really appreciate those games. And if somebody gets out a copy of Scythe, a board game thing, if I happen to go to, I used to go to these public board game things, in Bristol. Absolutely. Yeah. Sign me up. The more complicated, the better. You got a weird Napoleonic tactics game? Yeah. Yes, absolutely. No problem whatsoever. But I think in reality, I'm 33. I ain't got time for that. I generally don't have time for that kind of thing. I don't have time these days all that much for big games like Assassin's Creed, for big games like Gloomhaven or anything like that, because I'm just I can't get 4 people together regularly on a school night. What are you talking about?
Do the pod, to be honest.
Exactly. I'm genuinely surprised I'm here.
This is a really, really long-winded way of coming to the conclusion of having an existential crisis about your age.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, this Mark is an intervention that you and I arranged for Pete, isn't it?
Yeah. You see, what you've done is you've kicked things off with The Matrix came out in 1999, and now I'm furious.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.
Have you ever come across that when someone's trying to pitch a game to you and they say, oh, well, it's like this, cross with this, cross with this, cross with this. And actually, initially, that was quite a cool thing to say. It's like, oh my gosh, I love those things. Put them together. That's great.
Yeah.
I love vanilla ice cream. Oh my gosh, I love pizza. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love bourbon biscuits.
Yeah.
Let's put them together. What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
And actually, Scythe, if you pull it apart, is actually, I don't need to have engine building cross with area control, cross with a war game, because I've got War of the Ring. I've got Inish, which is a lovely area control game with cards that's very light and breezy. You can do it in an hour and a half, if that. And I've got Oh My Goods, which is a lovely, tight engine building game, which is just a deck of cards.
Oh My Goods.
And each of those can be played on their own. And I don't feel like I need to have all 3 of them at once in one game. And I don't, that translates, I think, across to more media and things. It's not just board games.
There is definitely this, Mark, I don't know how well you know, I mean, are you a big board game fan?
I wouldn't say I'm like a massive board game fan. I have the ones that I do enjoy, like the Guitar and Tickets to Rides, and my god,
you know a bit about them.
There was one that I sat down with recently that I played, and I can't for the life of me remember it. But it was you were given everyone was given I think a deck of about 7 cards, and they had pictures on them, and one person would go at a time, and they'd have to just say anything. It could be an expression, a phrase, whatever it would be.
Dixit.
Yes, that's it. Exactly what it was.
Ah, there we are.
And I sat down, I played for the first time, and within half an hour, I was like, okay, I love this game. I want to play this game again. So I don't play board games often because I don't have a lot of people around me to play board games with. But as soon as I play something, I usually do get sucked in pretty quickly to playing them.
Right, and so you're au fait with okay, you know board games, you know a little bit about the medium because you've been around it, and you certainly know video games, you certainly know movies. I definitely feel like there is this continued push to go harder and harder and harder core into all of these mediums, right? So for example, I've just fired up BGG, right? And they have this thing called the hotness, and these are just the games that are the big games at the time that everybody is talking about. And I'm looking through the list, and you see stuff like Wingspan, which just won the Spiel des Jahres, for example, and it's just okay, cool. I get why people are talking about that, but most of the stuff in here is pushing further and further and further down the either it's a big game with miniature, it's got lots of miniatures in it, or it's like a big legacy game, or it's got tons of complicated stuff in it. So literally easily scrolling through it, it's like Gloomhaven, Root, Arkham Horror, the Lord of the Rings, the card game, all of these games that just keep going further and further and further hardcore into the space. And you see it with video games, you see it with I think to some degree with movies, like with video games, for example, it's like it's not enough now to just be excited for, you know, it's not enough to just be excited now for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You now have to be excited for like the season pass, and you also have to have like you have to get it from here because then that gives you this content, and like you're gonna have to play it for 100 hours because like this is like you know it's gonna be a 100-hour game, and like this constant push towards like, well, if you're not playing every day, is it even a video game? Like, it's the same with board games. It's like, well, if you aren't able to get a group of 6 together to play this ultra hardcore board game with miniatures and legacy and all this other sort of stuff, it's just like, well, what even are you? You know, very, I don't know. And I kind of feel like, no, get away from me. Don't want any of that. Want a nice game about taxis in New York. That's what I want.
It kind of reminds me, have you ever seen, like, you go into, not petrol station, but...
Service station.
Service station. Why did I just escape me there? And you'll see they'll have, like, you know, express versions of Monopoly, those very kind of short, condensed versions.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like that, just, you know, taking a board game and then kind of condensing it down, and or even take like a mobile port of a video game and just stripping away at it.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Final Fantasy 15 mobile port. It's just like, here's the feel of what this is. All right, bye. Like, because it's just like, yeah, that's what I want in that space. I don't want 90 hours of something.
No,
like,
in fairness, that sometimes works, and then in the case of like a Super Mario Run, it completely ruins what
fine.
The experience is.
Yeah.
So it's not a completely perfect
no, of course,
method or process, but I would definitely pick that up. That sounds like something I would definitely play that version. So. My friend of the show on my podcast, Dave Ryan, he early this year was just throwing praise at this game called Baba Is You, and I was kind of half listening, like, yeah, sure, that sounds interesting, whatever. Yeah, sure, great. I'm playing Ape Out. That's my thing at the moment. Baba Is You is a puzzle game, but it's more like a game that teaches you very kind of basic ideas on programming and coding. So you have a square, a grid tile-based square that you exist in, and you are Baba. You are like a tiny kind of weird bunny rabbit, I think, or sheep. Like, it's hard to know exactly what Baba is. Okay. And you can move Baba around on the screen. And you may have, or you will definitely have at some point, 3 tiles that will say Baba is and you. And you can push one of these tiles. You can push the tile Baba up or down or whatever. But if you do that, you break the chain, and then suddenly you can't move anymore because now Baba is not you anymore. Now, somewhere else on the screen, to give a basic idea of a puzzle, there might be a rock somewhere else on the screen, and there'll be the tile that says the word rock. If you move or push the tile rock and then replace Baba with rock, you suddenly now take control of the rock instead of Baba, and you move the rock around the screen. That is a very, very, very simple core idea of the game. The idea with the game is that each level there is a tile that says win, and it usually is flag is win. You move whatever character you are or object you are over that tile that says win, and you move on to the next level. Okay. So at some point you find flag is win, you go over to the flag because it's sparkling and shiny, and come over here, you go over it, boom, awesome. And the idea with the game is that it expands on this simple premise to make it more complex and infuriating, and adds all these different ideas of like Baba is you and hedge, and now you can move the rabbit and a hedge at the same time, and you suddenly have to move these in different ways to do whatever it is you need to do. Or maybe you have a lake, and it's a physical thing that you can't go through, or if you touch the lake you will disintegrate. So you have to find a way to basically switch the lake off. So, it'll say like water is melt or water is death. And you have to find a way to move that tile that says death. So you can then go through the water. And just all kind of variations on that. And it's very much the closest thing I can kind of describe it to in the thought process is, did you play The Witness?
Yes, Jonathan
I
Blow.
didn't, but yeah.
So the idea with The Witness is that if you look up, a video guide, or you try and look up anything where you don't actually learn the rule itself. If you then try and go and do a puzzle afterwards, you're kind of f***ed because you really need to understand the ruling yourself. You know, if you go and look up a tutorial or a level on how to do it, you may as well just look up the levels for the rest of the game because you haven't truly understood what you need to do.
Right.
And brute forcing your way through puzzles isn't really possible. You'll just sit there for an hour just kind of pushing tiles and not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, again, it's like a very kind of basic introduction to programming or coding. These kind of just different if statements. And
right.
Yeah. The thing is, like, Dave explained it to me for about 20 minutes, and I wasn't that interested. But as soon as I played the first level, and I immediately went, I understand what this game is. Oh my god, this is amazing. And then I just went from there. And then after about half an hour, I realized, because the difficulty curve, it starts off very, very basic, like, yeah, I can do this. And then you are hitting a wall, literally and figuratively, within about 20 minutes to half an hour. As you can see a flag on the other side of a wall, and you're stuck within these four walls, and you're like, okay, how do I actually get out of here? Because I have no way to actually escape this. And you realize that you actually need to turn the wall into text, and then you can push the text tiles out of the way, then you can get to the flag. I would very much recommend it, and as the general rule and our philosophy and Link to the Cast, everything is best on Switch. And
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Go without saying that being able to pick up this game for 10 minutes at a time, get stuck on a puzzle, say, all right, I'll come back to this in half an hour, then come back to it, figure it out. It's mwah. Yeah.
We were chatting at work today about we work a lot with like different intellectual properties and all that sort of stuff, and like we were kind of throwing around this idea of like what kind of game would you make, right? What IP would you get if you could make any game? What IP would you get? But it can't be an IP from games. So it couldn't be like, oh, I want to make another Witcher, or like, oh, I want to make another Carmageddon. It can't be that. It has to be an IP that is outside of that, right? So it could be a book, it could be an album, it could be like a piece of art, it could be a film, TV program, whatever it is, but it can't be a video game. What would your number one be? Like, immediately.
Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop, right. Perfect. Great idea. I can totally see how Cowboy Bebop, the video game, would work
Space
out.
MMO.
How would you make it?
Go.
Point and click? What would you do? So what would you do with it? Like third person action adventure?
Yeah, like a third person kind of space MMO. You know, Perfect. You have probably a little bit of kind of Red Dead Redemption in there. You do bounties. Yep. You fly to different planets. You land. You go around. There's a little bit kind of No Man's Sky in there, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're Spike Spiegel. There you go. Sorted.
Exactly. Perfect. That's all you need to be. Chris?
I would like to do a video game on Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities, which is basically about when Marco Polo comes across Kublai Khan and he says, what have you been up to? He talks about where he's been.
Yep.
And the book is brilliant. Basically, you take you through all these different cities. Each city's allocated about a page and a half, and you just read a page and a half and you feel like you've read a whole book about this entire city. And maybe there is almost a little bit of a No Man's Sky vibe to it, but I imagine there's no linear path in terms of how you explore these cities. Right. But it's woven entirely by imagination, essentially. Things you've told him that you're doing, the level itself will create around that text. So you'll watch the city build, because there's this sense that he's buying for time. He's just making up these cities on the spot. So I like the idea of a level, almost in a kind of Unfinished Swan kind of manner, being made up on the spot.
Beautiful. So we were chatting away in the studio about this, and we were like, imagine Smash Brothers, right?
Okay.
But rather than beloved characters from Nintendo and other video game studios' history, right?
Yeah.
Instead of that, it's classic British sitcom.
Okay.
All right.
So like
Blackadder against...
No, let's go deeper.
Okay.
So imagine Some Others Do Have 'Em.
I was literally just thinking that.
Okay, right.
You know...
That would be in the trailer, wouldn't it, really? That's what would hook them in.
Yeah, exactly, right? Perfect. But watch out. Here comes a new challenger. It's Mr. Humphreys from Are You Being Served, right? Like, get in there, Dad's Army. Like, press square to put it up 'em. Like, all of this stuff would be incredible, right? I genuinely believe that, like, if you were to make this one-on-one fight team, or maybe even team-based fighting game, I don't care, Marvel vs. Capcom 3-esque thing, right? With, like, stand-ins and all that sort of stuff. Get some absolutely classic British sitcom stuff in there. And I reckon you would sell it to every person over the age of 30 in Britain. Like, what an incredible opportunity that would be.
What about, like, keeping up appearances? Like, Hyacinth Bouquet?
Hello.
Right.
Yeah, hello would be brilliant.
Exactly. You get Hyacinth Bouquet versus Rodney. It's right, and yeah, exactly. Think about the backgrounds that you could have. Oh, look, we're fighting on top of Princess Peach's castle. Who cares when you could be playing in the tunnel, in the basement in Goodnight Sweetheart? like, it would be perfect.
From there to a council estate in Peckham with a
right, exactly. You know. The game writes itself, and so basically, I just think that if we can somehow merge all of those, I'm sure, very expensive licenses together,
if we can merge that as well into Invisible Cities and the Cowboy Bebop and kind of bring all of these together, you basically end up with Homer's car that he makes in that one episode.
Yeah.
That was Staying In with Peter Willington, special guest Mark Robinson, and myself, Kris Darby. If you want to hear more from Mark, subscribe to Link to the Cast, where he and Dave Ryan wax lyrical over video games in their podcast. The latest episode, as of this recording, is on Shovel Knight, and is really worth a listen. You can also find them on Twitter at Link to the Cast. If you've enjoyed this episode and are keen to dig a little further, why not head over to stayinginpodcast.com. On it you will find our page on Board Game Geek, our Steam curation page, and all the different ways you can follow us if you so wish. At Staying In Pod is where you need to find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which is becoming my new favourite, if I'm honest. For those of you who want to get fit and do so for a good cause, come and join our team. Just head to your app store and download Charity Miles for your mobile telephone and look for us in the app at #StayingInPod. Finally, although the deadline has passed, you are more than welcome to join our fantasy football page. If you would like to join, just head over to fantasy.premierleague.com and our league code is MPV146. That's MPV146. Thanks for listening.